welcome to Conversation with Calvin, We the Species. And I'm with Dustin McCLONE, and we're gonna what a fan. We've just been BSing here for like a half hour. We BS'd last week. There was a lot of elements of commonality that brought us together. The old internet and the magic, mysterious things of LinkedIn. I always like to promote LinkedIn because it's a wonderful platform. And we connected on so many different fronts. The word confidence and the word entrepreneurship and the word and basketball, because he does so much with basketball. I was a basketball player. So I'm really thrilled. He is Hustle Nation podcast. We're going to talk about that. I'd just like to throw some graphics here. The official title, Dustin McCLONE, Hustle Leadership Network. He's a veteran of the insurance industry, a basketball coach, a podcaster, a graduate of Marquette. And that's a little close to me because at one point, Rutgers and Marquette were in the same Big East.
That's right.
And actually, I always liked, by the way, McGuire, didn't he coach Marquette?
Absolutely. Yeah.
It just hit me.
Yeah. Court's named after him and everything. Yep.
By the way, they won the NCAA one year, right?
1977.
Yep. And I forgot who they. This is all improvising this, but enough with. But I loved him. Was it Frank or Dick? Dick McGuire. Was it? I'm trying to remember.
Al McGuire.
Al.
Yeah.
Yes.
Al McGuire. Yeah.
Just a marvelous coach. And then there was another. Anyway, we'll talk basketball.
Yeah.
So I'm really thrilled that we connected, Dustin, and I just completed what I call, as I mentioned to you, my Johnny Carson. So I studied Johnny Carson, if people don't believe me. So this was my Johnny Carson monologue. There really wasn't a lot of humor, but so be it. But I'm really thrilled that we've got some time to spend together, because there's a powerful message here. We talked about it, that if young people listen to you and learn and take on some of your elements that we'll talk about, it really helps to move on in life. It's a real ingredient that they're not going to pick up doing this.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I'm done. How about little bio background? I love the fact that you. And I find this particularly rare in life, that you married your high school sweetheart. That's great. So take it away, a little intro, and then we'll jump into stuff.
Yeah. So, I mean, just a little background about me. I appreciate you having me on. This is going to be fun. A little bit of background. So call it my day job is I'm president and CEO of McCLONE Insurance. So we're a insurance risk management broker here in Wisconsin, but we have clients all over the globe. And so that really, and that's a family business. I'm third generation. And so what really kind of started that and the marriage of that and hustle was, it was probably about 5 or 6 years ago now. As you mentioned, I'm also a youth basketball coach. So my wife is as well. And, just for the record, Calvin, she's a much better coach than I'll ever be, but regardless, I try every day. So we're sitting there at lunch one summer, and I had just started to take over at McCLONE, and, it was a great company, but we were gotten kind of stagnant, and I just saw all this incredible potential in the organization. And at the same time, I'm coaching, I think it was maybe 4th or 5th grade boys basketball, and kind of the same thing. I saw all this potential in all these kids. And so we kind of had this interesting conversation of just, how to unleash the potential. And all of a sudden, kind of this light bulb went on, it was hustle, right? Like, if you can get the kids to hustle, or you can get your team to hustle, ultimately a team that hustles is always going to beat a team that doesn't. Right. So that kind of started to percolate a little bit. And, it's interesting because I feel like a lot of this I learned in coaching hoops, and then I found a way to kind of apply it to life and to my career. But, one of the things you realize hustle, so Calvin, you've been to plenty of youth sporting events, right? And so, you've seen all these parents where they're yelling in the stands, hustle, 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 right? We all do it. And yet the kids look back and they're like, what are you talking about? I thought I was. And it's it was at that point when I started to realize it's not until you define what the behaviors of hustle are that kids or even adults know how to do it. Right. And so, if you're talking hoops, right, it's running down the court, it's diving for the ball, it's boxing out every time, it's, doing the little details and focusing on technique. Well, once you define those behaviors and you reinforce them and encourage them, then people, okay, now I know what hustle means. Right. But in business, it's the same thing. A lot of people, if I went to my, team here at McCLONE this afternoon and just started yelling, hustle, 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 right? There'd still be people that look at me and say, thought I was, what are you talking about? So what hustle really is a framework now that, I built out over a number of years. And so hustle is actually an acronym. So it stands for hard work, unrelenting, smarter, not just harder, take chances, learn from others, and enjoy the process. And the idea is in each one of those categories, it's a framework, and call it even like a North Star, that allows really leaders of any profession and at any age, kind of that North Star to come back to say, okay, am I doing these things? Because frankly, these are the behaviors of super successful people before me that are timeless, right? I mean, this isn't an AI discussion, right? This is these are the behaviors that really successful people have elicited for years. But what's helpful about it is, I think, we talked about this a little bit beforehand, if you look at, young aspiring leaders, they can, in today's world, they have so much information at their fingertips, but it's almost information overload. And so the idea that they can have something relatively simplistic, that's a framework they can go back to say, like, look, I'm not quite achieving my goals. Why not? Well, am I following these behaviors? Because these are really the top behaviors that the most successful people have followed. And if I'm not, okay, well, then that's where I need to tweak, because you don't need to tweak your goal. You need to tweak the behaviors to get to your goal. So that was really, the kind of the foundation. And ultimately, when I built out Hustle, it wasn't meant to be anything. It was literally just meant for our team. It was, for my fifth grade basketball team and for our team here at McCLONE. And, as we started to kind of talk about it, all of a sudden I had people asking me about it and saying, well, that's interesting. Can you talk to my team about it? Or can you talk about it to this group or that group? And so that was surprising to me, because I didn't think it was anything, right? To be honest, everyone has imposter syndrome, right? And so you thought it was just, well, who am I to say anything? And so then from there, it's really blossomed. And so then, from there, we, Chris Burns, who's my business partner, he and I were talking one day, and, he's like, this is actually really interesting. You gotta go share this. And I'm like, I don't know where I'm going to find the time to do that, amidst my day job and as a father and as a husband and coach and all that sort of stuff. And so fortunately with him, now we've done the podcast and we built out Hustle Leaders, and, we're doing all this fun stuff. And I mean, today is a great example. I mean, without it, I don't know that you and I probably connect, right? Despite, now as we've talked, a lot of our kind of mutual interests, but, that's what's been so exciting about it, is it's, opened up all these cool doors that otherwise wouldn't have happened.
Right. And that's one of the, it's funny what I'm doing. It was just a goof kind of thing. 3 years ago, I was talking to a student, Claudine, she was a track star at Rutgers. We met on LinkedIn, and she was a sophomore and triple jump record holder, but she seemed so grounded. Yeah. So from doing this, I said, let's talk on the phone. And again, her level of maturity and her depth and grasp, it was fascinating. A week later, my daughter-in-law, social media exec, and I yelled, what is this thing called Zoom? Boom. And it comes in here, sets me up, and the light bulb, just like with you, the light bulb goes off. And I said, God, I can interview people on all the continents, everywhere. Exactly. This is great. And that's how, but anyway, let's just talk a little bit about, you mentioned McCLONE Insurance, third generation. So a little history of McCLONE, because I always find that fascinating.
Yeah. So, one of the interesting parts, it all comes back to sports. So McCLONE was actually founded by my grandfather, who was a teacher and a coach. So, but he also happened to have 10 kids. And so one of his mentors from Marquette University, believe it or not, said, I don't know if you know anything about big family economics, but you can't raise 10 kids on a teacher's salary. So, he started to sell life insurance at the kitchen table, and, really his entire vision, it was all about his teams and the community and people and relationships. It wasn't meant to be a significant business. It was more of a lifestyle thing for him. But he's in the state coaches hall of fame. And, if you've, remember the movie Hoosiers was on, I know you do,
Oh, 100 times. Coach Normandale. Oh,
yeah. Yeah. So he took a little small private school in Neenah, Wisconsin, or Menasha, Wisconsin at the time, and took him out to New York and beat all these big schools. And,
wow.
Back in the 60s. So really an incredible guy, Marquette guy, sports guy, hoops guy, really anything sports. So he was really, he got this thing kickstarted. My father, Mike McClone, then took it over in the 80s. And he's the one that really turned it into, a real business. I mean, he on the same foundation of people and relationships and doing things for the right reason. And then, when I was, fortunate to take lead here about, to give or take 6-7 years ago, it was an incredible time because, you look at it and there's so much pride. But at the same point, if you know anything about third generation family businesses, their success rate is not good. And the reason being is because usually the third generation looks at the second generation and says, well, I'm just going to do what they did and stop innovating and changing and things like that. And, to me, that was the biggest thing, right? I mean, this is a pretty significant legacy that exists that I want to make sure I'm taking, good care of and growing. And, plus we have a team and a community to give back to. So what's been cool about it is, now in the last number of years, we've gone through exponential growth. We're now in the top 1% in the country. We're going through a period where we'll probably double in about a 3-year period. But yeah, culture's at an all-time high and the team's just kicking butt. So that's been fun. I mean, when people hear about the insurance business, it's not the sexiest business, from the outside, but what we really like about it is, I mean, it's something that matters. There's lots of businesses you can do that, you can probably make a buck, but when we're protecting businesses, organizations, and families and able to really make a net giver, net positive impact into the communities that we're in, we just think that that's something you can lay your head at night and feel really, really good about.
Correct. And it's, to me, it's stereotypically one of the most unknown elements to your insurance, and if done right. And I love the notion, third generation, and you're serving your community, all of that. It just makes it better, and it makes it more palatable and more, I mean, the whole package. I just look back on my insurance history, that there wasn't enough McClones around.
Yeah.
Well,
we're trying to make more of them. So there we go. We're trying to spread.
There really wasn't enough taken down to
we'll be on Rutgers campus soon here.
Yeah. Hey, it's a big school.
Yeah.
Big school. Just before we jump into more the meat, your basketball, the coaching, the junior basketball coaching, and some of that gave birth to hustle and your work with fifth graders and the lessons learned. So you alluded to some of that. Just kind of tie it up.
Yeah. So if for anyone that's been around youth sports or certainly coached youth sports, you learn really quickly. You learn more from them than they learn from you. And that certainly was true for me. It wasn't, oddly enough, my father was a coach, my grandfather was a coach. So wow. You'd think that, well, yeah, I'm going to be a coach. And I've always liked to coach kids and just people in general even, but I didn't anticipate doing that. My son was actually going into third grade. And at that point, so that was about 6 years ago. So at that point I was just kind of taking lead of the company, and, you're getting pulled in a lot of directions. And, you suddenly realize, okay, what am I doing this for? At the end of the day, if I'm an absent father, and I have a successful company, then what really have I done? Right. So at that point I decided, you know what, I'm going to coach my son, because if I coach him, then I know, I mean, it's kind of built in. And I just hung up the whistle with him. I took him from 3rd to 8th grade, just hung up the whistle, here about a month and a half ago. And I tell you what, it was so much fun, learned so many things. But what's interesting about youth sports is you see so many things in life in a youth basketball team that for whatever reason is more visible, right? You see, there is no hierarchy within the players, right? So you start to see what leadership can look like, right? And leadership doesn't have to be the most vocal, it doesn't need to be a certain personality, right? There's leadership can take a lot of different forms, work ethic, never giving up, working outside of practice, teamwork, communication, confidence. These are all things that all of a sudden you start looking at. And I had the good fortune, because I got to coach these kids for all these years, you see their own growth, and when all of a sudden you start thinking of that and you start applying that to business and to, adults in their careers, it, for whatever reason, it just becomes a lot more visible. So that was really kind of the genesis for Hustle. And it's been a ton of fun.
Okay. Next question, and I find this particularly profound because we talked about it. I'd like you to talk about the word confidence, which is one of the key ingredients to success. And I mentioned this to you, and I'll mention this real fast. I had zero confidence growing up playing basketball, and I was way better than I ever dreamt I was. But I had no source of confidence installation, and you can't imagine how important that is. Even if I'm not, I certainly wasn't aware of that. Just I never had it.
Yeah.
Growing up, nobody ever said you're a good basketball player, so I never really pursued that until 15 years ago, when one of my idols, an All-American who saw me play, I played against him, said, "How come you never played for the high school? You're really good."
Yeah.
One of the best players I ever saw. And I went crazy, 15 years ago. I said, "Why didn't you tell me that back then?"
Yeah.
Profound, because
sure.
had I had that sense of confidence, that source. But anyway, it would have been, my life would have been different. But talk about the word confidence.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's so critical. I think there's a couple different ways that people can get to confidence, right? So, it's tough to be confident in something you've never done before. And so, it starts to me actually with the hard work piece. A lot of people, well, I'm not very good at this. I'm not, well, yeah, you probably do. I mean, we all suck at it first. I mean, you couldn't walk at one point either, right? But guess what? Now you can walk around a room. So, I think a lot of times when people are thinking of confidence, they assume that if they just believe it, they're going to be it. Well, no, step one is you got to put in the work. Right. But I think then, beyond that, what gives you confidence is that repetitive experience, and then being insatiable in your search for feedback. Right. So I think a lot of times people are waiting for that pat on the back. And the reality is you could wait a really long time for a pat on the back. It's really easy in today's world for people to talk negatively about somebody. It's really hard for people to support each other in a global sense. Right. And it shouldn't be that way. It is. People are busy. They're running in their different directions. But if you're working hard, if you have your clarity of vision, right? Because that's your start, right? You got to figure out what are you trying to go after, right? Once you figure that out, if you're working really hard and you're that insatiable curiosity, surrounding yourself with people that have maybe been there, done that, or can challenge you along the way, and getting that feedback, to me, that's what builds the confidence, because now you have the experience, you've been trying it. And because you're getting that feedback, the reality is if you ask people for feedback, it's not like all they're going to do is just light you up for an hour. I mean, humans are humans, right? They're going to talk about, yeah, you did this really well, but this got boring, or this got long-winded, or you could have done this, that, or the other thing better. Work on that. Great. Well, guess what? Now you're going to go work on that. So next time you're going to know you're better at that one thing. You're going to get better feedback. You're going to increase your confidence. And then, you just start. rinse and repeating. And in today's world, you talk about when you were growing up, the feedback loops were pretty much person to person, right? I mean, if you weren't belly to belly with somebody, it was tough. Well, today, in today's global world, I mean, you and I can give each other feedback, right? And we've never set foot in the same room, right? I mean, it's one of those things. There's so much more connectivity that there's really no reason for anyone to say, well, I can't find a coach, or I can't find somebody to be a mentor, to help me along, hold me accountable, give me feedback, because it's everywhere.
It's funny. I don't usually take notes when I do this. I mean, I have notes, but I don't take them. But I actually, while you were talking, I don't know if you saw me, I was actually writing, I wrote the word feedback search. And then my mind went, you jarred my sensibility, Dustin, because I remember working for Luxottica, the biggest eyewear company in the world. I started with them almost at day one, and I watched them grow from pretty much nothing to multi-billion-dollar company. My boss, the father and son, eventually 25 billion.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's funny. I have to find this. I don't know where it is. It's buried somewhere here. But there's a chart of 5 ingredients of leadership. And one was support. I remember it. And I took 50 courses as a regional manager for them over the 25 years that I was there. So I was, I took 2 significant courses a year. But one of these, they gave out this chart. So I remember leadership, support. This is the ingredients of leadership: support, and one of the rungs in that circle was feedback.
Yeah.
So it's and you jarred my sensibility, making me remember that. So let's now talk about what your Hustle Leadership Network is all about. How did that come about?
Yeah. So ultimately it got started, as I said, I didn't mean for it to be external at all. Actually, when I started talking about it within McCLONE, I didn't even call it hustle. We actually refer to it as 212 here, which is the 212 degrees is when water boils, right? And so about pushing that extra degree. And so that was really kind of what we had kind of built it around. And then as I just kind of talked to people about it, I got more questions. And so Chris Burns, my business partner, he and I were talking, and he, he's a serial entrepreneur, big marketing guy, and just kind of said, well, okay, so you're finding value in it. Yes. Do you think anyone else would find value in it? I'm like, I would guess so. At the same point, I was getting requests from a lot of kind of growing leaders, aspiring leaders, for me to be their coach, their mentor, which I knew I wanted to do. Like, I'd love to do that stuff, but time was just impossible. So I was like, how can I put this together? Well, at the same time, this is COVID, right? So I'm at home and for big chunks of time, right? You can't go anywhere. So, just like you talked about with Zoom, I started with my phone in front of a green screen and just started talking. Wow. Right. And just, here's a class on this, and here's a topic of this, and just built out this training program essentially that I didn't even know if it was going to go anywhere. And then, from there, it started to just kind of, catch wind beneath its sails. And so, really the cool thing for me with Hustle Leaders, we kind of drive to a few things. We kind of have a retail side where we do, training and coaching and things like that. But the part that's actually really taken off is actually more corporate workshops where, companies are saying, hey, can you teach our team how to hustle? Right. And it's been, again, because hustle means something to everybody. Right. And in some cases, it's interesting. We've gotten feedback that some people are anti-hustle, right? They don't believe in hustle because they associate hustle with burnout. And it's this weird kind of sub fabric. And as I shared, I'm like, if you ever looked at athletes that hustle on a court or on a field or whatever, they never burn out. It's not about that, right? Like, hustle doesn't mean burnout, but it really, hustle means you have the passion and you have the behaviors to actually do what you want to do, as opposed to, burnout is when you're spending a ton of time on things you don't want to do. But anyway, so we kind of went around with that. So, I'm fortunate where, Chris really drives a lot of that, and I get to be part of it, which has been a ton of fun. And then from that came our podcast as well,
which we're going to
which
talk about.
which has been, I'm sure you've experienced the same thing. I mean, you've been interviewing people for, many, many years more than me, but as you just learn something from everybody. And to me, the podcast has been this thing that was really surprising to me. I
showed us up.
Yeah, thank you.
For people to see the Hustle Nation podcast.
Yeah, it's labor of love for sure.
No, I did listen, because I mentioned to you, I have to be a good journalist. I have to get the feel, and I did listen to Luke Wyckoff, and you and Chris were interviewing Luke Wyckoff, who's quite an amazing personality. He said something, I said it to you before he went on air. He said a great quote, which I'm going to use, and I'll give him credit. I don't steal things.
Yeah.
But he started to say he was born at a young age. That's just what I mean, that's just great.
Yeah.
So it was a really enjoyable, warm, fuzzy podcast.
Yeah. Thank you.
And so I heartily recommend it. And and of course you'll talk about the purpose, leaders, entrepreneurship, and all this other stuff. But so talk about your work with Hustle Nation podcast.
Yeah. So the podcast it was also kind of a marriage of things. So, the other thing that, I realized for McClone, for years I had wanted to do a podcast, because one of the things you learn about in the insurance business is nobody wants to listen to an insurance podcast.
Right. For sure.
And, other than maybe people in the insurance business. Right. So that isn't really what I wanted to do. And so I've been talking about doing a podcast and something, and, when really we started to embrace hustle as, a kind of a fabric of our culture at McClone, it kind of became a natural thing to let's go talk about it, and let's go learn about it. And, when I think of the podcast, it's kind of twofold. One, I even re-listen to the episodes myself, right? Because, as when you're interviewing, you don't hear everything, right? And so you can re-listen to it. But I just learned so much from the guests and from a lot of the conversations that, each and every week I'm kind of further energized by, what I've learned. And the secondary piece, which I don't think I really thought about, was how many things I would learn from those guests that would be implemented in our company within a few weeks after.
Wow.
And so it's, when you can hear these things, because the beauty is you get to hear from people that you otherwise wouldn't have. You get to learn from them, ask them the questions that you want. It's been really quite a ride. And so, when we did it, we weren't doing it. This wasn't meant to be like a, big national podcast. We didn't know if anyone was going to listen. It was just, let's give it a shot and let's try it. But it's, been kind of growing steadily, each and every week, and has really started to catch wind, which has been fun.
And of course, folks will be able to find, I'll heavily have the links to that, and there's not enough of this out there. There's too much 400-pound people dancing for 15 seconds that 500,000 people are watching, and there's not enough of this, and it works. It works. Listen, I taught in college, and you can reach and teach and move and learn, because you never stop learning. And
Sure.
And the learning just keeps coming through. The stuff I read, and you get a chance every day to practice what you've learned and you've listened to. It comes up. Just one minor, I alluded to this. I always like to ask this question. You're under no obligation. It sounds formal. You're under no obligation, and it's like a TV commercial. Dustin, you're under no obligation to answer this, but it's a cute question. And I plagiarized the question from one of the great interviewers of all time, Barbara Walters.
Okay.
I was a big fan of hers. Anyway, here it goes. Again, you don't have to answer, or you can answer with 2 or 3 answers, one
Okay.
word answers. Here it goes. Excluding family or friends, somebody
Okay.
living or dead you'd like to spend a day with.
Family or friend, not family or friends,
Right.
living or dead, a day with. Elon Musk.
Great.
I'm sure it's a common one.
It's great. I just watched him on Bill Maher.
Yeah. One of the things that it's always impressed me with him is just, he has his own think track. And one of the things I've seen, even in my own life, I think a lot of people put ceilings on themselves, and certainly there is no ceiling on Elon. I mean, no one can say that the guy isn't
Not at all.
literally shooting for the moon, right? So, it's
Great answer.
somebody like that is, can only inspire you to do more.
Yep. Great answer. And I watched. Funny you said that. I watched. Bill Maher always has a special guest before he does his little table talk there. And he had Elon on for I think it was 20 minutes. Usually it's 5-6 minutes, whoever. But and I watched intently. I watched him smile. I watched him joke. I'm trying to absorb. But great answer. All right, moving along. And this is one of my favorite topics because I live it. Your comments on personal branding. I told you I've been wearing this hat for 12 years, and this is not for me to talk about, but wearing this hat for 12 years has been transformational for me. So your comments on personal branding.
Yeah, it's a thing that I don't know that I even recognize the value of it until the last maybe 4 or 5 years. And my background has always been in sales, networking, business development. That was, really, that was my core skill. And so I knew the power of that. And so I knew, the more, it's kind of it's who you know sort of thing. Right. And so how do you continue to expand your network? No one can ever take your network away from you. Right. So that was something that I was very focused on. But, to your point, the personal brand piece, what do you really stand for? What are the things that people kind of tie you to? I don't think I quite appreciated until later in life. And the reason being is because, to your point of the, your Rutgers hat, right? Apparently I should be wearing a Marquette hat. That would have been a good rivalry here, but
Sure. Yeah.
It's the same mindset, right? There's, probably not a person at our company here that doesn't know my passion for Marquette. Right. And it's not because I'm over the top with it. It's not because I have a flag in the office or, things like that. It's just, they know about it because they know that's a passion of mine, but it helps because I think it allows people to see where mutual connections are. So often we don't realize how many common connections we have with people that we seemingly have nothing in common with. And it blows my mind. And so I think that's a big thing people miss. And the cool thing about branding is it gives you some common ground to build from, right? So, you from a Rutgers perspective, right? If whether you're passionate for Rutgers or not, if you recognize what your hat is about, right, it opens a door. For me, hustle actually has been, one of those things for me. I mean, certainly my personal brand now is very much wrapped around hustle. And actually a good friend of mine who runs a big auto dealer here in town is a great guy. Anytime he comes across anything with the word hustle on it, he seems to either buy it or take a picture of it or send it to me. I think more to give me hell than anything, but no, it's, that's what's fun about it, right? Is it gives you things to talk about. And, certainly I know even the first time we talked, I mean, the Rutgers Marquette thing came up right away because of it. Right. So to me, that personal branding, I think a lot of people don't spend enough time thinking about it. At the same point, I also think that some people are so worried about getting it perfect that they stop making progress.
Uh.
You know, I'll be blunt. When I started going out with kind of the hustle brand and tying it to myself, I was super nervous because, you know, the reality is you go out with a brand like that. It's kind of hard. You know, what if anyone looks at you and says, you're not working very hard? You know, like the imposter syndrome can be real, you know, when you lead with that. But, you know, what you quickly realize is that you're your own worst critic. You're going to criticize yourself far more than 99% of the world. There's always going to be noise. You know, I always say if you're not doing anything, then nobody cares. But if you're doing something, there's always gonna be a few people that are going to be against you. Of
course.
And that's fine. It probably has nothing to do with you anyway. It's probably just their own insecurities. So just run, just go, and, you know, be the best version of yourself. So it's been, you know, the personal branding is really critical. I think, you know, people would be surprised at how significant it can be and how much it can change your trajectory in your life and in your career. But at the same point, it does take time. Everything in life, I feel like, especially in today's world, people are so used to instant gratification. And I can't tell you, I joke about it all the time. How many people you talk to that you look at them, you're like, man, they are an overnight success. And then you talk to them, like, yeah, I've been doing it for 15 years. It's like, okay, well, you're not an overnight success then, right? I mean, you've been sacrificing and cranking for 15 years. I guess I've only seen you for the last year, but that makes sense, right? And it's because they've been making those deposits. They've been creating that compounding interest, so to speak, that has been building up, and, you know, then all of a sudden they're breaking through.
Well said. Really well said. How important it is, and I just take my yellow highlighter out from college, and we had those when I went to college.
Oh, yeah, me too.
I don't know when it was invented, but thank goodness I was able to use the yellow highlighter. When did you know? Because, by the way, I'm listening to you, and you know, this and absorbing, and you know, each collection of paragraphs that you spit out and talk about, I'm realizing you really are an inspirational guy. And you are absolutely delightful to listen to, and it is motivational, and it is inspirational. So Dustin, when did you know you really wanted to? And because you have this, just I call it as I see it, at this, when you become a septuagenarian, as I am, you as soon as you rip the calendar off and you say, oh God, I'm in my 70s now, at least for me, you call it as you see it, because what the hell, you know?
Yeah, right.
It's a great time in life to call it as I see it, and I'm calling it as I see it. You're perfectly delightful and inspirational, and I could listen to you, and I'll go to the podcast, and I think it's a great quality and a great gift that you have.
Thank you.
So when did you realize that you wanted to, like, inspire people? Because you do.
Yeah, you know, I think it's a lot like other things. I don't think I realized, I don't know if I even thought of it that way for a very long time. You know, I was fortunate, even when I was a kid, I had some experiences that I don't think I thought was a big deal, but then people come back to you years later and start talking to you about the impact you had. I use an example of when I was in high school. I played for a small private school, and I'm very confident we were probably the worst football team in our school's history. But so I was trying to recruit kids, you know, to be on the team. I was the quarterback at the time. So like I needed to, you know, kind of build the team, right. And build people around. And there were kids that I had asked to be on the team that then ended up joining the team. And I didn't think anything of it. That then, you know, 5, 6, 7 years later, I'm out of college and I'm talking actually to their parents. And they're like, I don't think you realize that he wasn't going to go out for the team until you talked to him and you gave him the confidence to give it a shot. Right. Yeah. And I'm like, well, I don't know. are you saying that's a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know, because we got our butts kicked, but so that started to kind of seed the fact of like, okay, there is some impact there. But probably the most impactful time for me is even as I started to take lead of McClone, I didn't think of the impact I had on other people, or I could have on other people for that matter, until it was actually one of our leaders here. I tend to be a talker, right? I'm a storyteller. I'm a talker. So sometimes I just say stuff, and all of a sudden she was repeating things that I had said,
Wow.
which
Wow.
scared the crap out of me, to be honest. Cause I'm like, oh, what else, what else did I say that probably shouldn't be repeated. Right. And, so when you start to hear that, you realize, okay, then I guess there is some value there. There is, some impact there. And so how can I spread that further? How can I impact more people and inspire more people? And so, I think like a lot of things in life, I don't know that it was necessarily a light bulb. It was, kind of more 1 degree at a time, where all of a sudden it's just, yeah, I like that still, like that. There is something there. There is a little bit more. And I think hustle has just kind of impacted that even greater. If you would have asked me 3 or 4 years ago that I'd be sitting here talking to you and having cool conversations like that, I would have never envisioned that. But, if you asked me that 6 months ago, I would have said, yeah, I could maybe see that, because it was only 1 degree, right? It's just 1 degree. Right. And, God knows what's going to happen 6 months from now. So.
Great answer. That's great. Another little semi-heavy. So how has failure shaped your life and your success? Great question, which you
Yeah.
kind of fed me. And that's an interesting question.
So there's so many people that are anti-failure. I'm the complete opposite. Not that it's not like I wake up in the morning and say, I hope I fail today. Right. That's not the right mentality, but one of the kind of subtenants of the T in hustle, which is take chances, is fail forward. So I talk about, failing is not a problem. Failing is just part of life. Failing and then giving up is the problem. Failure, not learning from it, not moving forward, that's the problem. And, so often in life, we think we have failed, when in reality, we just gave up. And if we hadn't given up, we wouldn't have failed. And it's because, I forget who said it. It might've been Bill Gates actually that said this, where, we overestimate what we can get done in a year, but we underestimate what we can get done in a decade. Right. And it's because of that compounding view of life, right? Where you don't realize, well, if you just do this day in and day out, you know what, it may not take a year. It may take 3 to 5 years. But then in 10 years, imagine what that looks like. Right. And so, to me, failure, learning from failure, embracing failure, not being afraid of failure, I think is one of the most important tenets of successful people. And I think we talk about a lot of mental health issues that we have in our world today. I think a lot of it stems from that. I think a lot of it stems from the fact that people are so afraid of failure and so afraid of the negative talk to themselves or from other people from that failure, that they never get off the start line. I mean, you talk about our podcast. I guarantee you listen to the first few episodes, they're awful. And the reality is, the episodes we're doing today, hopefully will be considered awful on episodes we do 6 months from now, right? Because, you're hopefully continuing to get better. And so failure doesn't even have to be like a big miserable failure. It can be these micro failures that you learn along the way. So no, I'm a big proponent of embracing it, not being scared of it, not letting it create inaction. And, again, a lot of times if you just have that lens of asking yourself, what happens if I fail? Usually it's not that big of a deal. Unless you're literally betting the farm, right? You're putting all your chips on red. And if you don't hit it in 3 months, you're going to be bankrupt and belly up. Even then, guess what? You're still better than a huge percent of the population. You're waking up next day. You're a little bit smarter for it. Maybe you're broke, but now you can build from that. It's crazy.
I'm listening to you and I'm absorbing, and once again, you have jarred my memory and sensibilities. I have a great story for you. I'm going to really make it short, but it's one of the great examples of failure. You'll be able to reuse this. It just popped into my head. I haven't thought about this. It's from my time at Luxottica, but here's the story. Some guy is given a project, big company, and he makes a terrible mistake. And by the end of the day, it cost his company $40 million. And the following day, he's called into the CEO's office, and he actually has his bag packed because he knows he's getting fired. Goes into the CEO and he said, I know I cost you $40 million, and I know I'm going to be fired, and I apologize, and it's been nice working for you. And the CEO says, you're not getting fired. Why would I fire you? I just spent $40 million to teach you something. Isn't that great?
Exactly.
Isn't that's
perfect?
Great?
Yeah. It's a fantastic response. Yeah.
Yeah. Use it. I give you my permission.
I love it. I love it.
Last serious question, and we'll do a wrap with some b-ball stuff. What do you recommend for people who experience your failure, fear, or doubt? How do you get unstuck from that? Last serious question.
Yeah. So to me, I think there's a few ways to do it. One, find somebody that can support you and can cheer you on. Those that have good support structures obviously have a huge leg up, because if you don't need a lot of people in your corner, but if you have a few diehards in your corner, you can do quite a bit. So, to me, that's one. The second thing is perspective. I think far too often people dread on failure. I mean, your story just now is tremendous. I mean, look, $40 million, I'm sure was a lot of money to Luxottica. I don't know where they were on their growth scale at that point, but the reality is they still became a multi-billion-dollar company after that. Right. So, I'm sure, there's perspective, and, I have no idea what the mistake was, but, sometimes we look at these mistakes as such big mistakes when in reality, to your point, it happened, right? I mean, bad stuff happens. You got to learn from it. You got to grow from it and move on. And when you have that perspective of what really does this mean, there's not a lot of failures that cause death. Those that cause death, okay, I get it. That's irreversible. But, outside of that, there's not a whole lot that can't be reversible, right? That can't be fixed. It may not be pleasant. It may not be easy, but that's life. I mean, life wasn't meant to be easy. If it was, everybody would do it. Right. So, it's one of those things. I think if you have perspective and you have that support, failure just doesn't seem as heavy anymore.
Great. I took more notes, Dustin.
Very good. I love it.
Yeah, I took more notes. And I look at this stuff, support, perspective, good stuff. Taking a deep breath, going away from heavy. It's funny, when we first got together and chatted a couple of months ago, it was pre-Final Four.
Mm-hmm.
So we had no idea how things were going, and now we do. Do you have any comments on the Final Four, both men and women, and also your comments on NIL? I'm a very confused soul.
Well, so on the men's Final Four, I don't really like to talk about it because Marquette was a 2 seed going into the tournament, and we thought this was going to be a big year for us. So I'm still a little bit bitter, but no, we had a great season. It's a great team. We got everybody coming back. So
are they coming back? You guys, they're all coming back.
They are. Yep.
Wow.
So,
you'll probably be top 10 preseason, maybe.
Yeah, it's so funny because I think at one point, I don't know if we still are, but at one point we were number 2 for preseason. But I think it's hilarious because this last year we weren't even ranked preseason, and the whole mantra of the team all year was, why do you give a crap about rankings, and why do you give a crap about preseason rankings? They mean nothing, and it's true. So like we're talking about that last year, I kind of think the same thing this year. Like, who cares? I mean, at the end of the day, we're gonna. I mean, knock on wood, we don't want to have injuries. We, everybody come back and continue to get better, but it'll be a fun year. It'll be a fun year. So, but I tell you what, the one that really stole the show was Caitlin Clark in my mind. I mean, you talk about, creating excitement and I think you mentioned it before. I couldn't agree more. She's like the Steph Curry of
Oh, yeah,
women's
for
basketball.
sure.
And I mean, it's like one of those things when you see talented people like that, it just takes you back, because I mean, she's not, the amazing thing to me with her, I mean, quite frankly, she's the epitome of hustle. I mean, this is not a superhuman, right? If you look at her, I mean, it's not like she's 7 feet tall, or, she's, a different body build even than anyone else, right? She's just, you can tell she has spent more time in that gym than absolutely everybody else out on that floor. And everyone else on that floor has spent a lot of time in a gym,
Yeah.
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 And, the dedication and effort that she had to put in to get to where she is, is mind boggling.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And
yeah,
I find myself looking now toward the last half of the season, looking on ESPN for to see when Iowa was playing so I can watch.
Yeah.
Like I watch, I don't watch a lot of NBA, but I got a kick out of Steph Curry because I don't know how he makes half those shots. I can't
he's unbelievable.
process.
Yeah.
Can't process that.
Yeah.
It's almost as if he's throwing Hail Marys and they
Yeah.
all win.
Mm-hmm.
It's just remarkable, and she's the same way. So
Yeah.
it's great for women's basketball to
Yeah.
create that kind of interest. I have reservations. I don't have answers on NIL. All I do know is 10 or 15 years ago I went to a lecture
Yeah.
here, and they were talking about what you can and what you can't do as being a booster,
Mm-hmm.
and I think and it's 15 years ago, but I think I was told I could not buy a cup of coffee. Something like that, a cup of
Yeah.
coffee for a prospective a recruit, or I
Yeah.
could buy a cup of coffee and a donut for a current player. That's how strict and rigid. And now you can buy them a house.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So what
No.
are your what are your feelings about NIL?
So I'm certainly
By
not
the way,
an,
Marquette is not
no,
it's not Texas A&M here,
no.
where they're buying, they're giving $30 million to the team.
Yeah.
Marquette is Marquette.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm not an NIL expert by any means, but I think it's such an interesting topic, because to me, there's kind of two opposing forces. So, if you look at kind of the legacy, I have similar concerns that so many people do, right? Is it just gonna be a couple of boosters that, feed a couple of programs, and, frankly, now it's, whoever can make the most amount of money coming out of high school, going to which college, is that just the game? There's going to be some of that. There's going to be more of it than what there was, because, now it's going to be more legal. I mean, it's not like it wasn't happening before NIL. It was just,
yeah. I don't want to go there.
Right. Just happening differently. Right. So to me, that's an interesting piece. The more interesting piece, because I'm just not an expert in it. I view it like so much change in everything in the world. There's like two different types of people, right? There's those that hang on to the past, and it's almost like Chicken Little, right? Like the world is ending, the sky is falling, versus those that take a more proactive approach and recognize that, the reality is NIL is a change. I think there's certainly some things that need to be figured out, because otherwise it could get dramatically different really quickly. But there is some positive to it. I mean, we were talking about this before. I mean, Caitlin Clark is a great example. I mean, the reality is that she'll probably do better on, I don't know this, but I'm guessing she'll probably do better on NIL than she would probably go into the WNBA.
Correct. You're right.
So, there's some benefit to that, right? There are some of these, athletes that, are going to get rewarded, for lack of a better way of saying it. Now when you talk of men's basketball, there's a lot of talk about, specifically, I don't think it's just the NIL. I think it's the NIL with the open transfer portal, where, it's almost like you got to re-up, each player each year.
Yeah.
And you can't blame the players, right? Like,
Not at all.
you know, they're playing the game too, right? They're trying to figure out what their career. And so it's really hard to, you know, you're a 20-year-old kid and somebody offers you gobs of money to just go shoot hoops 2 cities down. And by the way, either way, you're going to have the same opportunity to go in the NBA. I mean, that's hard. It's hard to pass up, right?
Sure is.
I tell you what, if I was 20 years old and I got offered to do anything like that, I don't know that I wouldn't do that. I mean, if I was 20 years old and I had an insurance company call me and say, hey, what if you drop out of school, but we'll pay you gobs of money to go to college over here? I'd say, all right, that sounds good to me.
Yeah.
So I think it's an interesting thing, but
really interesting. It's going to evolve. And I don't know, I think Congress at some point is going to start looking into this, and they should, it went from being no coffee to houses and cars, and the NCAA has to, they went from, it's like the old West.
Yeah.
And I think it's wonderful for players, because I could never understand all these years why I couldn't buy a player a cup of coffee. Come on, give me a break. And they're making tons of money on their name, image, and likeness. So anyway, it's a great topic to talk about, and I'm really glad for the players. I was a big Boston Celtic fan growing up. Bob Cousy, Bill Russell, and what I marveled about the Boston Celtics: Bill Sharman, Jim Lesketoff, KC. I mean, all of that. It was what I marveled about that team in particular, because they kept winning, is they stayed together. It was the real definition of a team. Nobody left. Yeah, they stayed together, which is a nice thing.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, Shaka Smart, who's the head coach of Marquette, and this is the big thing he talked about last year, which, when he said it early in the season, it's not like he disagreed with it. He talked a lot about, we want to be the most connected team in the country. That was interesting, right? Like, okay, I get it. That makes sense to me. The more interesting thing to me, though, was when they lost the game, not in the tournament, but prior to that, or I shouldn't say it, they didn't lose it. They were losing in the game, and they ended up coming back and winning. And he actually talked about, he goes, that's being the most connected team playing itself out. Wow. Because a non-connected team would have started pointing fingers at each other and being like, you made that turnover, you made that bad shot, you did this, you did that. Versus the most connected team, they didn't waste any effort on that. They just kept on playing. They just kept on staying together. And that to me was a really interesting perspective, because you always hear about, I mean, clearly a more connected team is going to be a better team, but at least up until that point, I don't know that I had ever quite made that direct connection of like, okay, you're heading into the second half, you're down 18, you should have been winning by 20. What happens? And then those relationships, that connected team, that culture, right, really carries you through.
Yeah. And that's a great way to say this has been a wonderful, I just have to remind everybody, Hustle Nation podcast. This has been great. I'm officially or unofficially before, I'm officially now come back during Chris. We talk about anything. It has been, you've been, I said it before, you're absolutely perfectly delightful and knowledgeable, inspirational. I'm so glad this came about, Dustin.
Likewise. Yeah, I appreciate you having me. This is fun.
Yeah. So I'm going to sign off, quoting Clint Eastwood, Dirty Harry movie, something like, you made my day, and you did. And do come back. And again, I can't thank you enough for your graciousness, your energy, your hustle.